Wall number 2 done.
I know.
Can I help you? You have a bathroom user. Do you want me to film you?
No, baby.
We're taking our $100 temporary shower here in our utility room, which I lovingly refer to as the throne, and upgrading to the nicest shower we have ever had the pleasure of showering in. Let's get started. Before we dive into the grand finale of our dream shower, I'm super excited to tell you about a new brand we're starting this year. It's called Buy Land, Build Dreams. Our mission is to make the best resource to help others build out their home and homestead. The first product we're releasing is called the No Regrets Build Guide. The exact details are still a surprise until launch, but it's made for anyone planning a dream home build, remodel, or any other major home improvement project. It's gonna save you a boatload of time, energy, and money. And we wanna thank the folks who are watching our normal weekly videos like you are right now. So we're including some special launch bonuses only for those who sign up to our email list before the launch window closes. One tactic shared in just one of the bonuses saved us over 10 times the cost of the guide by itself. So this is absolutely worth your while. Head to masondixonacres.com or scan the QR code on screen if you're watching on a TV to get signed up. Now let's get tiling. Now it's time to do something about these sidewalls for the shower. We are finally ready to tile these. Let's start with the tile. This is a 2.5 by 8 Zalise tile, so it's got this kind of handmade look. The brand is Harmony, it's made in Spain. We bought so many tile samples and this is finally the one we landed on. It's kind of off-white, matches the back wall pretty well. We knew we wanted to put it vertically on the wall, but we weren't sure whether we wanted to stack all of the tiles so that all the grout joints lined up like a grid, or whether to do an offset like 50%. After several mock-ups in the garage, we decided to go with the stacked pattern, just kind of a clean, modern look, but not like too modern with this type of tile. It'll definitely look good when it's done, but what scares me is the fact that all of the grout joints are lined up, which means very little room for error. We really have to pay attention when we're planning this all out. This guy is the secret weapon for getting these joints lined up perfectly. I'll call it a story stick, just a piece of scrap poplar that if you look very closely, there are joints marked that coincide with the heights of the tile. So this is the vertical side, even put a grout joint on the bottom, and this is the horizontal side. So every tile width, there's a 1/16 of an inch grout joint. We laid this all out on the garage floor. And just in the little bit that I've been using it to play around with the mock-up on this tile layout, it has already paid for the time that I spent making it. Just having that instant clarity of where all your joints are gonna line up and being able to play around with them and shift them as you want to, this no-cost tool is well worth it. Before we get into layout though, what's important is looking at our existing level of plumbness for our corners. With this grid pattern, any out of plumbness in these corners is going to have to be compensated for because it will show up. It'll either be a grout joint that's way too thick and will be ugly, or we have a sliver of tile trying to fill that in. So that's not good. Whatever we do, we need to compensate for any of that from the beginning. So I fired up my little laser level back here. I realize this is gonna be hard to see on the camera, but up there, the laser is just about touching the tile. But if you come down halfway, it's about 1/4 inch, I would say, off the tile. And then it gets a little bit closer down here, but not much, maybe 3/16 there. I actually knew after I put the waterproofing up that this corner was a little bit out of plumb. I checked it after I put the boards up and it was too late to put shims in, but it was still within tolerance enough that I knew I could kind of work with it here. However, I think another thing that contributed to this was these end tiles on my large formats. I should have totally struck a line down the edge here that was plumb. That way I could kind of build these out and use the self-leveling to make them coincide with that line. And then I would essentially have a plumb corner here. But I didn't do that. I just kind of pressed these in any way that I felt that they needed to. And I think the lower ones, because I had more leverage, I pressed in further than the upper ones up there because I was on a ladder. So that's just something to keep in mind. I should have struck a line where these guys needed to land to get that plumb line, but now I'm gonna have to compensate for it with the subway. It's more work that way, so I would have rather fixed it from the start, but it is what it is. Looking at the other corner though, this one is pretty darn good. So whether it was lucky or what, I don't know. It's a little bit tight here at the bottom, so we'll have to shave a little bit more off those, but other than that, this one's good. Now let's talk layout. This is what it would look like if we were to start with a full tile at the corner here. However, because of that extra deficit we have to make up for in the middle, I'm gonna take like 1/4 inch off this spar tile. You probably won't notice it, but those middle tiles are gonna have to bow out just a little bit to compensate for that extra gap. Here's where that puts us on the other side, so about 49 inches. It's gonna come over a little bit more, and then we're also gonna have a Schluter profile to cap the side of this off. That's got some width to it as well, and I probably cut that piece of trim behind the toilet too short, so I might have to fill that in. Should have figured out this tile layout before putting that trim in, but hindsight's 2020. Let's look at vertical layout. This is really important too, so that we get joints where we want them relative to this niche. The last thing we want is to put a joint like right here, and then you have this 1/4 inch sliver of tile right above our niche. Same thing here. That would not be good. My first instinct was to put this right around here. Here's a sample of the profile we're gonna be using to cap off the corner of the niches. And I was thinking, okay, this one's right at eye level. We're gonna line this joint up with the top of the niche, boom. Well then look where that leads me down here. With this profile installed, I have like a 3/16 1/4 inch strip right above this niche. We do not want that. If I drop my story stick all the way down to the floor, this is where we decided it actually makes sense just to start with a full tile. These two joints kind of fall mid-niche. There's not gonna be anything that draws your eye. And this lower joint right here just so happens to fall perfectly at the top of our niche bottom here. This is a piece of matching quartz that we used on the curb and the countertop in here. We had another piece milled to fit this, and this joint just so happens to fall here. So we're gonna start with a full tile on the bottom. I feel like planning the tile layout is the hardest part of the job, just figuring out what's gonna look the best, how it's gonna go in, and thinking through details like how are we gonna finish out the corners of these niches. Schluter really has the market on profiles, which are basically tile edging. This is a little sample of one. This is their Rondeck profile. It's basically a 90-degree smooth corner. So we got 8mm Rondeck, and that matches the thickness of our Zalige tile. We're gonna be running that on the sides and the top of each of our niches, and those side pieces will butt into the quartz piece that we have for the ledges. Looking horizontally at the niche, there's no perfect way to do this, I feel like. You're gonna have most of a full tile there, but you'll have, I don't know, 3/4 inch sliver there. We'll effectively be pushing the stick into the wall this way about 1/4 inch. So you're still gonna end up with most of a tile there, and you're gonna expand this one a little bit. I think that's the best we can do. So we will have a seam kind of running up alongside the niche, but unfortunately it doesn't work out with this tile to split a seam on both ones, just a little bit too wide. We have to start with a solid foundation for this wall tile, and I went back and forth on this quite a bit on whether to use a ledger or not, and I am gonna use a ledger. So I found a good straight piece of plywood. I'm gonna be screwing this to the wall one tile width up, and that will be the start of our second row. And then I'm gonna come back after everything's dry and put the first row in. The reason I was sort of hesitant to use a ledger is because you gotta screw holes into the wall, so I'm puncturing my waterproofing. But I'm gonna come back with the same stuff that I waterproofed these holes with to put over it. That's kind of what made me feel better about it. But what really pushed me towards using the ledger at the end though was the little triangular pieces I put in to infill at the edge of this tile just have some unevenness in it, and it's hard to tell exactly like which one is the reference that I should be using. So I'm just gonna cut those out of the equation, start with a perfectly flat, straight piece of plywood. This is the factory edge that I'm using on this. And that way I don't need to worry about that first row screwing me up. If I need to come back and make some minor adjustments to those bottom tiles when I'm putting them in, I can do that. So I'm gonna put my story stick up against the wall, find one of my edges that's sort of middle of the road. And with a nice sharp pencil, that's key, make a line at the top of my first grout joint. Now with my best, most precise level, the same sharp pencil, we're gonna scrub the line where the plywood's gotta go. Tile's just kind of intimidating because if you only get one shot, it's gotta be right because you don't wanna be ripping this stuff out. Working with time-sensitive mortar, and to boot, it's aesthetic. It's gotta look good. That is what makes tile so hard. Harder than woodworking, I think, because you can always go back and sand a little bit more wood off or repaint it or restain it or whatever you got to do. Just a very interesting trade in that regard. The guys who do this with full confidence in everything they do is pretty impressive. All right, so I should be able to fit a tile under here with a couple 16th inch spacers all the way across. Guess this is a good way I can check to make sure my line's going to be good when it comes to putting the tiles in at the end of the day. This one's a little tight. I don't think it would hurt to shave a hair off the bottom ones that are tight rather than make a big loose gap for everything else. Yeah, so like this one's got a pretty good gap underneath of it. All right, I drew a second line, but that was a little low. With some mock-ups using my horseshoe shims, I decided 3/16 total was a good gap, so I could have a 16th right under the second row between the first and the second, and then an 1/8 at the bottom to account for any of those little pieces of tile that are just not quite perfect. So I'm gonna put this ledger right underneath that. Pre-drilled these so it wouldn't be fighting me. And these are just 1 5/8" drywall screws, nothing special. Get them started in just the foam to make sure we're lined up before I get into the stud. I set the laser back up so that at the point where it's the worst, which is right about here in the middle, that is just at the one tile width mark with a little bit of room for some caulk in the corner. So both above and below this, we're gonna have to shave off the edge of the tile just a bit so that we can get that left edge to sit on that red line. So there's that little bit of interference right there. We gotta push this tile this way. In order to do that, we gotta take about 1/8 of an inch off the bottom of this tile in a wedge shape up to this corner right here. Basically scribing the tiles to the wall, both above and below that largest point in the center. Tapered that thing down, you can just barely even tell, and I did the one that goes above it as well. Now the edges of those both fall on that line just perfectly, and my layout stick tells me now that that mark that I transferred onto the wall is the end. My only other consideration with this is I'm gonna be getting a glass door installed on this eventually, and I wanna put that right in the middle. So I just wanted to make sure the tile was further than the center line of our curb. So this is gonna be the edge of the last tile, and then there'll be a profile that goes a little bit beyond that. I'll go grab that profile, and I think I can mix some mortar up and get started laying tile. This is the easy part until we get to the niche. 1 part water to 3.3 powder as per usual. Water goes in first so you don't got powder sticking to the corners of the bucket. I usually end up putting a little bit more water in it anyway, just to keep it workable. I'm using a 1/4 x 3/8 inch square notch trowel for this. Really, I should be using a 1/4 x 1/4 for this size towel, but I don't have one of those. This is the best one with what I got. I'm just gonna make sure I don't go all the way perpendicular, which is what's gonna give you that true 1/4 x 3/8 notch. I'll go at a little bit of an angle, and that should get me a 1/4 x 1/4 roughly. Just gonna start slow here and do just the first row.
Go, baby, go. Go, baby, go.
She's so happy to see her shower come in. Finally, after all these years, a shower. It's finally appearing. Probably should check coverage. Usually good practice on the first tile. Pretty decent, I would say. Could use a little bit more, I guess, there, but I think that'll ride. Got 2 types of 16 spacers. I'll probably just interchange them when I need them. Horseshoe and little plus sign. I like these better just because these imperfect tiles, this only contacts a very, very small area on it, whereas this like bridges a lot of that imperfection, and I feel like you end up with bigger grout joints with this one versus the plus sign, but they both work. Also, I feel like sometimes, especially with these cheap ones, the little horseshoe can be kind of cockeyed, so it's not quite perfect, and that also leads to bigger joints than you otherwise would typically need. All right, first row down, and we're coming to the end, and I actually might be good with this profile. I don't know how this worked out. That's about where it needs to be for one tile to fit in, and we're about there with my trim. So I'm not sure if I planned that from the start or if that was just accidental luck, but not gonna count my eggs before they hatch though. So I need to put thin set up to where that line is, embed this thing, and it literally is almost the entire way to the ceiling. Like when it's up on the curb, it is just about 4 inches short. So I think I'm gonna secure it up there with painter's tape for now and sort of mud it in as I go up to make sure it's perfect with the tiles. Really don't wanna get mud on the wall or I'm gonna have to later. I should have left the second to last tile off, but whatever. I need like a mini trowel, like a really tiny trowel. I have this little margin trowel. This tile I'm just back buttering. Hands are messy after this one. There's a groove built into the profile. It's kind of a self-spacer for a 1/16 of an inch. So that's all I gotta use. Yeah, that actually worked out perfectly with my lower trim. I can't believe that. Just a little bead of caulk is all this needs down here and we'll be golden. Here's row 1 with the profile. I'm happy with that. Don't need to fix that. Wonderful. Let's keep rolling. Inspector Gadget, what do you think?
It looks great.
All right, one bucket did 3 rows exactly with the bottom niche. So I've mixed up the second bucket. Before I did that, I pre-cut some tile. Excuse my awkwardly lopsided circle for the shower valve. I used the toilet paper roll. That was the perfect diameter for that. However, not perfectly circular. I also cut my niches to length. I just used the miter saw for these. These are PVC. You can either mount these on the inside like this or on the outside face. My first thought was, yes, let's put it on the inside because of this extra thickness here. I can easily compensate for that without being seen in the niche, whereas out here, there's gonna be, you know, maybe a little bit of a ramp down going that way. But then I was looking at this niche a little closer and it is just slightly out of plumb. For some reason, I don't know if it's how it's molded, but these are nice and level. These are a little under 1/8 inch out of plumb from top to bottom, both sides. So I think to compensate for that, I'm gonna put this on the outside, get these perfect with the tile, and then I'll deal with any extra build out that I need to on the inside to make that tile line up perfectly with the profile. It's not a perfect science with these natural looking tiles. It's gonna be messy. Side note on this shower valve gasket right here, this is backwards, so don't copy this. When you look at this on the packaging, it's facing this way, and I literally just thought that's how it was supposed to be installed, and I put them both backwards, so I didn't feel like it was worth cutting out. I mean, a lot of showers don't get these at all, but it was part of the system, so I figured why not. So this isn't gonna do a whole lot as far as waterproofing this shower valve goes, but the trim kit does have a gasket on it. We'll just have to be really careful when we install that. Got a little bit wide on this one. I just sort of held tiles up to this and eyeballed where they needed to be, and that is why it's not perfect. But we got an escutcheon plate to cover all of it. This is not exactly specified in the instructions for how to get mortar underneath this profile once it's already kind of on the wall. So I just made this up as I'm going, but it seems like it's getting it underneath. I'm able to smush it out. I didn't want to like totally fix this in place because I wanted to be able to adjust it as I went up. I think Schluter's recommendation is to like put the profile in place totally before you start tiling, but then that would really limit me. This tile would have to be perfectly straight and plumb, whereas here I got a little flex with it. All right, batch number 2 of mortar got us up and around the hardest part of the whole shower, which is the niche. So from here, it should be pretty smooth sailing. The only thing I have to cut out for is the shower head, and then I do still have to scribe along this back corner. So I've done a couple rows now, just taking like 1/8 to a 1/16 inch off at a slight angle to compensate for this wall kind of coming in. But the rest of this wall, in theory, should be pretty smooth sailing. I'm gonna go ahead and take off my ledger board now. The bottom rows are dry. Seal those holes up so that dries, and then I'm ready for the bottom row after I'm done with all this and done with this niche. Things stuck pretty good. Oh yeah, these holes are nothing. Just little tiny things. Couple tips I wanted to pass on that have been huge for me on this project, in particular with these little subway tiles, and for the big tiles too, to some extent. First of all, get yourself one of these guys, a stick roll Amazon cheap plastic thing. It's got these dumb American units on one side and millimeters on the other side. And the second tip here is work in millimeters. First of all, with the stick rule, you don't need to worry about the tape measure and going back and forth. If you have a good tape measure, it doesn't matter, but when you're really like trying to get precise distances on these tiles, especially around these little niche edges where truly 1 millimeter makes a difference, you're not worrying about the tape measure edge and you're working in a unit that's easy to remember and easy to mark and work with. Like, what's easier to remember, 32 millimeters or 13 and 13 30 seconds or something like that? That works when you're doing like woodworking, I guess. I mean, I use it woodworking, but for some reason when there's time on the line, when we have drying mortar and I just need to cut things quickly and accurately, nothing beats millimeters. Makes so much more sense. Why do we not use it in America? I couldn't tell you. Freedom units, I guess they call this, the inch system, but it's like based on Queen Elizabeth's arm length or something. Not an ideal way to measure things when it comes down to it. The earth moving industry is even weirder because they use tenths of a foot, which do not correspond to inches because inches are twelfths of a foot. So whenever I'm hanging out with Travis, who's our excavator and my buddy, they're working in tenths of a foot and my mind is basically just blown. I mean, whoever decided to use that needs to be fired. Pretty sure this was the same thing that brought down the spacecraft back in the 90s. Someone was working in millimeters, the other team wasn't. The importance of using the proper units. We've come to the shower head. So I've mocked up the center point just with these two little dots. I'm gonna draw crosshairs about right here. And then I got one of these diamond bits to grind a hole in this that's just bigger than the shower head. I've never used them before. We're gonna see how it works. All right, here goes nothing. There's no pilot, so how the heck do I know where I am? You know what? A drill press would probably be a lot easier. Oh, it put a hole in there. Yeah, I don't think it's exactly on my marks, but clean this off and we'll give it a shot. All right, comment if you remember the game Operation as a kid. This, oh my gosh, I just failed. This is the adult equivalent. Hey, not perfect, but I think it'll ride. That was actually really easy to drill that. Well, folks, aside from the niche, that is a fully tiled shower wall. Let's go. Couple takeaways from my first ever vertical subway installation, especially with this Zalige type tile. This is a molded tile, by the way. It's not handmade. I think we bought this through Home Depot, but it's got this sort of imperfect texture on it. And the same thing goes for the edges. Like, they're not all exactly the same width and height. They're pretty close. The nice thing about that is it gives a little bit of like leeway to shift as needed just a little bit. The spacers that we're using, these little plus signs, are 16th spacers, but when you insert them between these tiles in specific, it makes an 1/8 inch gap at the front. So there's a kind of a little bit of a taper when you go to the front of the tile. If we were to use 1/8 inch plus signs, these would have huge gaps. They would look really ugly, but this is actually perfect. And you can't rely too heavily on the spacers. You can't think of them that importantly because it varies just a little bit. So you kind of have to like stand back, give it a good vibe check and make sure everything kind of looks right. And even if the spacers don't fit, it's gonna be good. That's really what matters at the end, is that it looks good. Second, how about this? These joints somehow lined up almost perfectly with my large format joints. I did not plan that whatsoever, complete accident, but that was just kind of a fun little happy accident. Third, I'm glad we put the profiles on the front wall. It did not cause any issues with like extra thickness buildup or anything, completely negligible. It allowed us to get this perfect clean reveal on all the edges. Even though the niche, for some reason, because of that molding issue, or maybe it was my install, I don't know, it wasn't perfectly plumb on the sides, we were able to compensate for that, no problem with the profiles. The only thing we're gonna have to do is on these sides, I'll have to build this out with mortar a little bit so that this inside tile sits flush with the profile, but that's no problem whatsoever. And finally, the last thing I want to mention about this first wall here is when you first comb that fresh mortar out, just get all the tiles up on the wall for that bit immediately. Don't worry about spacing, butt them up tight at the bottom, tight to the side. That way there's not too much squeeze out when you do go to squeeze that in and space it out. That way you're getting a nice, fresh, clean push into the mortar. It's not skinned over at all, and you can easily shift them all around to space. I got started on the other side here too, got a few rows up with the last of the mortar I had. Check out this little setup with the hand jack. So I only had 2 studs to fasten to. In order to keep this from sagging, I just used my hand jack to lift it up to the very edge. I screwed my story stick to my ledger to increase thickness there. That way these things had somewhere to lift on, and that works just wonderfully. Something else I did over here was put some vertical guidelines in that actually extend all the way through the niche. I didn't really have any problems in the last one, but I thought this would help. But as I go, I'm just making sure the very edge of this tile is perfectly lined up with the guideline, and that will help keep us nice and straight as we go around the niche. So I'm gonna keep trucking on this thing. I just mixed up another new batch of mortar, which is always a great feeling to start the day with a nice batch of mortar. As far as timing goes, I thought each wall was gonna take me about 2 full days of work, and I think that's about right. This is day 4, but I've only worked like, I don't know, 6-8 hours a day-ish. We've mixed in walks and other things. So it's definitely not a quick turn project unless you're really good. Having a cut person really, really helps. So I've been commuting all the way down underneath the deck for every single cut, recut, minor adjustment. Probably a day out of these 4 days has been spent just walking to the saw and back. So if we had the saw in here, that would make things a lot quicker. And if I had another person doing just all the cutting for me, Elena's working on other things. So I'm just going back and forth doing it all myself, and that just takes a little bit longer, but it's okay, slow and steady. Small batches of mortar is key. I told this story, I think, in a different tiling video, but when Elena and I first did a shower, it was about 7 years ago at my mom's house. And I think it was just the, well, lack of experience, first of all, but also the instructions on the bag only give you instructions for how to mix up the whole bag, all 50 pounds of thin set. And so when we started the project, I was like, okay, we'll just mix up the whole bag. Well, that was not a good idea because then we were up till 1 o'clock in the morning racing to finish the shower before our only bag of thin set dried out and was dead. So it is possible to mix up small batches of mortar. Just do the math, get the right ratio. And I've only been mixing up maybe, I don't know, maybe if you balled it all up a cantaloupe size at a time, roughly. And that gets me about 3 rows up. That's about the time it starts drying out. By the time I start doing all my cuts and everything, it takes a while. This stuff has pretty good open time, but it doesn't have, 10 hours of working time. So just something to keep in mind, mix up small batches as you need them, and you won't have any waste either. Like in that whole first wall, my wasted mortar was probably a few tablespoons at most, because I would just get to the very end like I did last night here. The very last tile that you can get to, in this case, the third one here, used up literally all the rest of my mortar, scraped off all the excess, got maybe 1 more tile out of it, and that's that. This stuff's not cheap. You don't need to be wasting it if you don't have to. So small batches is key. Come on. Toilet paper spacer for the win. So as I'm putting these tiles up, I just had a realization that the reason they have that little bevel on the side is so that they self-space to a 1/16 of an inch. And by putting our 1/16 of an inch spacers in, that's how we're getting the 1/8 inch. I don't really know why I forgot about this, because the last shower we did had that, but they're rectified tiles, so they're totally straight and precise. So they actually have little bump outs for that 1/16 of an inch spacer. But these, because they're a little bit wavier and have some rough edges, I guess they just decided to do the taper. It probably helps get them out of the mold too. It's called draft, so that the tile can easily pop out of the mold. It's not like a perfect rectangle, it's more like a trapezoid, but serves the dual purpose of self-spacing the tiles out. Very glad, however, we did not just rely on that, because there is no room for wiggle, especially with tiles that don't look perfect. You kind of want that side to side and up and down. You know, they're not all the same width, height, thickness. I am glad we used the spacers. There you have it, folks. Wall number 2 done. The hole I drilled for this was a lot better placed this time around, and everything else pretty much turned out exactly the same. So it got, again, full tile start, full tile end, and on this side there was no scribing or partial tiles or anything. It was straight all the way up. That looks really clean. I do still need to put a tile right there, but I'll cut that later. The final frontier of our tile project before we start grouting are our niches. Left those till last. I don't think they're really gonna be that hard. The hardest part is really thinking about pattern and layout, whether you wanna go with wrapping around the pattern, kind of where it leaves off. So like 1/3 of a tile here would end up with 2/3 of a tile starting off over here. We decided otherwise. Since we have a full tile here, we thought it would look best to put the full tile as close to the front of the niche as possible and have the sliver towards the back and just keep that symmetrical on both sides. So even though we don't have a full tile there, we're just gonna start fresh with a full tile, sliver in the back, do the same thing. This grout joint will obviously continue through the back of the niche, and we're gonna do the same thing with this guy here. So we will start with small tiles. That's another big personal preference. Like the tiles could have spanned this whole distance, but we are gonna keep this line in here just so that when you look at it from afar, there's no break in the pattern. It looks like kind of just a pushed in section of the tile wall. I'm gonna start by tiling all the back surfaces first. That way on these sides where we have that cut edge in the corner, the grout joint is facing this way and not out towards you where you're gonna see it. It'll be virtually impossible for me to get my trowel back in here, so I'm just gonna use my little margin trowel to skim coat the back here and then back butter and trowel every one of the tiles so that I can get good coverage. Just too hard to get the bulky trowel back in these niches, especially this top one. This little margin trowel has been great. One of our frequent commenters, Kevin Hornbuckle, actually recommended this in one of my past tile videos. I think it was the shower waterproofing video. And I'd never used one of these little rectangular margin trowels in a tile project before, but I had used it quite a bit for the stone veneer project, which is kind of like exterior tile. But man, this thing has been great. So thank you for that suggestion, Kevin. That was a great call. It's so nice to have a tool that's smaller than the tile to back butter with, so you're not getting it all over your fingers and stuff. It's just way more maneuverable for getting in tight spaces, scraping the bucket. Just a great, simple tool overall. When I was putting the radiant floor down, I used the bucket scoop a lot, which is great for cleaning out 5-gallon buckets and moving larger volumes of material. But for a project like this subway tile, just the margin trowel and the 1/4 by 3/8 notch trowel have been great. I started making a little cut list for all the cut tiles I have to do for these niches. As I was writing this down, I was like, holy crap, there's a lot of tiles in here. I started doing the quick math. Per niche, 23 cut tiles. That means 46 per side, 92 total between the two niches. If you're doing niches, get your wet saw out. I just spent, between generating this list, doing all the measurements, going down and cutting it, I probably spent 2 hours. They're not exactly the same between the two niches as well because of the pattern is just slightly shifted on that one because of the scribing. So in order to keep the pattern, the niche has got to be a little bit different too. And the depth of these niches means that there's these little slivers in the back. So that's 4 slivers per niche times 4, 16 sliver tiles. It just adds up to quite a bit. So I'm glad I saved this for last. This whole box is all custom cut tile. And as you can see, I labeled the back so that I knew which ones were which. This is a Z. I literally ran out of the alphabet because there's 26 different sizes I had to cut. Little slivers like this are not ideal, but there was not much way to avoid it with this particular tile and this particular niche. I tried to think of some creative ways to get around it, but this is the thinnest tile we definitely have installed anywhere in the shower. Good old shampoo bottle right in the back should hide it just fine. That is a very delicate operation, trying to keep these little tiles in line in the back of this niche without disturbing too much. These little wedges are really handy for that. Also for cleaning out the joints, the wedges are really nice too. But honestly, these are mostly kind of just like balanced in there, especially that top one. So that mortar sets up a little bit. Then I can make any fine adjustments I need to, and it won't move. I thought I was going to need some little support rods to keep these things up, but actually it seems to be sticking really well. I don't think they're sagging at all. Kind of forms a suction when you push it in there. Not gonna lie, this is incredibly tedious, messing around with these little slivers in the back of these niches. Get them to sit just right. The wedges help, but it can only do so much. I don't even bother putting wedges on the sides either. Too hard to get them positioned, so as this starts setting up, I'm just gonna come back and check to make sure that it's gapped right and it's standing straight up. Ladies and gentlemen, mostly gentlemen, I present to you the very last tile of this entire shower. This makes me incredibly happy. Finally done at the wet saw after all these years. Wow, that was a lot of tile in those niches. I probably made 100 cuts with the wet saw at least. I had to recut probably 12, 15 of those because they weren't perfect and I'm a perfectionist. Needless to say, I am glad for all of the cutting and applying of tile to be done. However, we still have to grout this whole shower and caulk all the edges and seams that are change of plane. So in the meantime, with those niches drying, I'm gonna get rid of all the spacers that are still left and all the dried tile, wipe all the tile down and get any thin set residue off or get any out of the cracks that might impede the grout from going in. And then we will be ready to apply some grout. Check out the project leftovers on this one. Barely any scraps for 72 square foot of tile. Couple rips. Most of this was generated from the niche where all the cutting was. One box of full tile plus two, so got real close on our estimate there, and pretty much all but a 50-pound bag, a thin set. That's pretty solid. This is what we have for grout, Laticrete's Spectralock 1, two different colors, bright white and fossil. Fossil pretty much matches what's in the groove of the large format tiles here. So hopefully it's gonna basically disappear when we put all that in. Spectralock 1 is a premix grout. Its claim to fame is that it gives you similar performance of epoxy grout without, of course, mixing two parts together, and you don't have nearly the same short working time as you do with epoxy grout. We've put it in our floor so far. It seems like it's holding up really well. It's not flaking out, brushing out, or it's not gritty or anything. It seems quite durable, so I think it's gonna do great in the walls. This is how we picked out the actual grout. So these were free samples that Laticrete just had on their website. You can order them. We got just a whole bunch of colors that we thought we would like and sort of held them up against the tile, sort of put them between the tile and mock up what you like. You can see we've also been mocking up some caulk here to color match with this white. But this was really helpful to see exactly what we liked. This is the bright white that we ended up choosing. So it's not an absolute perfect color match, but it's pretty darn close, and this has got the texture as well. And then Schluter had the same thing for the profiles. The color on these is pretty important to get that right, and this was the closest they had, this kind of off-white. As with anything, doing a mock-up on an actual scrap of tile or a sample or whatever you have really is the best way to see things. You can put it in the lighting that you're gonna have it in. That changes color a lot. We've learned that several times on this project. So if you can get the real thing and get a sample of it, that is always the go-to. I'm gonna do this back wall first. Got my little QEP float there. First wash bucket, second wash bucket, and I'm only doing the flat portions of the wall right now. The vertical corner, all the seam around the wall to the floor interface, that's all gotta get a flexible sealant. The key here is getting down to the floor without getting any in that floor joint. These joints are really small. It's not gonna take much to fill these up, and there's only a few joints on this whole back wall because the tiles are so big. Barely gonna use any grout. I was thinking a little bit about order of operations, like maybe I should caulk first. That way I'm not even having to bother with keeping the bottom and vertical edges clean. And I was doing a little bit of reading into that, and I decided I like my original way, like I'm doing it now, grout first, then caulk. Main reason is that caulk can stick to grout that's dried, but grout can't really stick to caulk that's dried. So I think that'll give you a better sort of waterproofing layer after everything's installed and cured. And then another thing is if you caulk then grout, you might have like some grout over top of your bead of caulk, and eventually every shower should be recaulked. So it's gonna be a maintenance item, you know, no matter what. And I don't really wanna make it harder on myself by having to like dig around grout or take some grout out while I'm taking the caulk out. If the bead is on top, be pretty easy to score that and peel that off, whereas if there's grout over top of it, that's just gonna make your life harder for maintenance in the future. It's pretty tough to work it in this tiny little joint. Just as I suspected, the grout lines definitely are disappearing with this grout. It's crazy how those little black lines just totally fade away into nothing with that grout. The flow just seems like it's putting a lot of extra excess on, so I'm just gonna put as much as I can in with my fingers, especially because it keeps filling up these grooves. I'm just gonna use the gloved finger and get some in and then go over it with the float, just to see how it fills that up. That's lame. Just gotta use the little corner just to clean out every single groove. Crazy how when this stuff gets spread thin, it just starts drying out so quickly. 5-8 minutes, all you got to start coming back over it with the sponge for sort of the first wash, trying to rub it in the joints a little bit further. Most importantly, get the excess off. My first tile job ever, I was like 10 years old with my mom. And this tile job is still out there at her house. I don't know what we were thinking. I mean, this is 2005 we're going back to here. We were not grouting and cleaning as we went like I'm doing now. And for some reason we thought, like, I guess that we would just leave the grout and come back later, and we wiped over an entire wall with grout. It looked like this, right? It was basically crusted on the surface. And then we like went and had lunch or something, or I don't even remember. We left for like several hours. I think it was even the next day. And we're like, okay, like let's clean the wall off. And it's like, it's stuck. It was not just a light haze you could wipe off. It was like thick chunks of grout, and it took forever to try to get this stuff off. It certainly wasn't coming off with a sponge. I think for most of it, I honestly had to take a razor blade and just painstakingly shave off the grout until it got down to a haze. Then we could use like an abrasive pad. It was a nightmare. It was like the whole shower. It wasn't good. Luckily, it was not as big of a shower as this was, but it still doesn't look good. It never went back to its original, tiled state. You can still see some amount of the grout that's left on the tiles. And that was a lesson learned early in life that I knew I would never do again. So just read the manufacturer's instructions on the grout. It tells you very clearly that within 5 to 15 minutes, you should be coming back over this with a sponge to wipe off the excess. And when done properly, it works great. I mean, these grout lines are just disappearing. About 2/3 of the way done. It's looking pretty good. The only thing I've noticed so far is if there's any amount of lippage whatsoever between the two tiles, when you're looking at it like this, like you would be if you were standing in the shower, you can see that dark joint right there. So I might come back and touch this up with a little bit more grout once that's dried, when it can stick in there a little better. Otherwise though, it's looking pretty solid. My only pet peeve with this tile though, is that this linear pattern is not equal across the whole tile. We mentioned this in the video putting these tile up. If you look at the pattern right here, it's pretty much perfectly aligned. But if you come over on the same tile, by the time you get to the end, it's like 1/8 of an inch off the pattern. I do not understand why or how that's possible, but it is. All right, we're done. That was not too bad as far as like linear footage goes, but it was just tedious getting the small 1/16 inch grout joints packed up. And Laticrate says that you should do like a second wash 45 minutes or so afterwards. That's to get rid of the haze, but I'm really not seeing any haze. I tried to look closely. Maybe it's just the texture and color of this tile. It's not glossy. It might be a little bit different on our Subway that's got the gloss finish on it. But I think it looks great just with the first go over on this wash. So it's on to the other two walls. Those should be pretty easy, switching colors to bright white. I didn't even put a dent in the bucket of this fossil color. So we're gonna put this back on and save it for a future tile project. Something I didn't mention on the first one is that a little wipe with a wet sponge before putting the grout on really makes it easier to slide around. Kind of acts as a release agent. think this should go a little bit faster. I'm trying to go kind of at a 45 to the joints, and then when I'm wiping it, well, this is circular. When I just had the long single joints, only perpendicular, going in the direction of the joint would just wipe all the grout out. So also avoiding getting it on my floor because they are very different colors. This is much whiter. This truly is a bright white. Grouting the grooves in my profiles as well. Grouting walls is just harder because grout's always just trying to fall off on you. Floors, it's so much easier. Got to really pay attention to get all the way down to the floor too, because all this is going to get otherwise is a bead of caulk at that joint. And that's also going to be what sees the most water. Now, this is still going to be labor intensive. Honestly, what in tile isn't labor intensive? Am I right? This is definitely going to benefit from like the traditional first and second washes. Right now, I'm just trying to get the mortar into the joints a little bit better with the sponge. Clean out a little bit of the excess. Just doing small, manageable sections is key. Like I'm doing basically 2 rows, half the shower. Now I'm getting into the niche, but that's about what I feel comfortable with before it starts drying. Like by the time I get up to here and I'm forced it into every little crack, the stuff at the bottom is starting to get a little bit gummy. So once I've got it complete, take the sponge, give it a good wipe, and it's really starting to get crusty by then. So I definitely don't want to end up like the shower I was talking about earlier, because if that sounded like a train wreck, let me assure you that it absolutely was a train wreck. Imagine this dried all over the shower. That was insane. So we're not gonna let that happen on this one. And just like that, our first wall is done. By the magic of film, our second wall is done too. I did not, however, do the niches yet because I want to talk a little bit about those. TCNA, or the Tile Council North America, has pretty clear guidelines on whenever there is a change of plane in tile, you use a flexible sealant because of the differential movement between those walls. So like this is an exterior wall, load bearing. This is an interior, non-load bearing. In the seasons and humidity changes and wind and whatever else, these might move a little bit from one another, and that would cause grout to crack and fail. I've seen it all the time. I see it in hotels all the time. So we will definitely be using sealant around the base of the shower and these vertical joints. Those are the most important areas. The niches, however, this is one of the most visually critical areas because we're gonna always be looking at this and reaching in it. The sealant situation for us is a little bit weird on this because Laticrete, unfortunately, does not make a sanded caulk to match their grout colors. They have unsanded silicone, 100% silicone that matches the fossil color. That's what we're gonna be using anywhere it's adjacent to fossil. But bright white here, it's basically just it's a white 100% silicone, and I figured we would just use some white Lexel or some Clean and Seal or some other type of white bathroom rated caulk if we're gonna do that. But the more we thought about it, it's so hard to make that look as good as grout wool. Like you're always gonna see a bead of caulk here. It's gonna look different than the sanded grout does. So I'm making the executive decision to go against the book a little bit on this, and I'm gonna grout the whole niche, even the interior corners that should otherwise get sealant. Part of my reasoning here is this is a preformed kind of already made niche. So there really shouldn't be any reason that like the side walls and back walls are doing different things. Like it's all one piece, it's all the same material. Unlike a custom built niche that actually used framing to make the pocket in the wall, that might be subject to some movement if it's wood expanding and contracting. But being that this is one piece, I think we're gonna be just fine. I think it's gonna look a lot better. The one area we are gonna use some sealant though is right under this drip ledge though, because we won't see it, we're never looking down at that. And that's the drip edge that water is gonna be constantly dripping over. So we'll get to that when we seal everything up with sealant. I do think this is a pretty big miss on Laticrete to not offer a sanded alternative to match their colors. I know Mapei offers this. I think Polyblend's another brand that offers sanded grouts, and I probably could go try to find, a bright white version of some other manufacturers and match this, but it's like such little area in these niches that I figured it's easier just to do this. We'll live with the consequences if something cracks out. I'll scrape it out and put some caulk in there, but that is the next best alternative, is to go out, get a different manufacturer that offers the look that will look more like grout. It's gonna be a little tricky, but not nearly as tricky as cutting and applying all the tiles. It's been nice in this step not to make 80 million trips down to the tile saw. I got smarter on this side too with the floor protection, putting down some painter's tape. As you can see, it really caught a lot of grout. There's just so many little bits and pieces that fall down when you're smearing it on the wall. And there we go, grouted niches. That was really pretty tedious to get that up in the corners, but luckily the float helped a lot with that. I do think that looks pretty good. That looks a lot better than I think a big old caulk bead would look in the corner here. It really also helps that I put this bottom piece in first so that these side tiles are butted into it, which means this grout is really only forming like a dam, like a vertical dam to keep water from coming back. If I would have put the back in first and then the bottom, it would almost create like a little well. The grout joint would be facing upwards where it could collect water. So I think the layout will help this situation as well. The good news is these niches will be very easy to inspect. We'll be looking at it basically every time we shower. Now let's talk caulking. So here's our little sample. This is the normal grout. This is white Lexel. You can see it's got that glossy texture on it, similar to the tile, but looks much different than the grout. And then this was clean seal. It's more of a matte finish and it's a little bit brighter white than the Lexel. We think that this one matches a little bit better, although on camera it looks like this one does, so it's kind of hard to tell. So these are gonna be our two products. We'll have to put the white Lexel back in the stable. Little known fact that they make this stuff in white too. You usually just see it in clear. White is the other color they make it in. Like I said earlier, the Lattisil is going everywhere. There's already a fossil color, so this floor to wall joint there, this floor to wall joint, it'll match the fossil on the floor. The wall to wall joint, we thought this would look a little bit more muted with a fossil color instead of the white. The clean seal we'll use under these niche ledges, all along the wall to curb here and up underneath the curb. And then that wall to ceiling joint up there. What's kind of unique about this product is it's an enzyme caulk, so it's got active enzymes in it that break down the shower products, body oils, that kind of thing that contribute to mold growth. So having it on the drip ledge for our niches, I think will help because it's going to be constantly getting soap and shampoo drip. And same thing for underneath the curb where it's going to be getting splash up. It's always going to be in a shadow and it's rarely going to, if ever, get cleaned because it's so hard to see it. It's so hard to get up underneath there. You have to be actively thinking about that. So we're taking a little bit of a hybrid approach here with our sealant, but I think it'll turn out well. The Lattisil is, as its name would suggest, 100% silicone. Main feature of this is that it color matches the rest of our grout. Before doing the real deal, I always like to do a little bit of testing on some scrap wood. I'm using a kind of new to me tool, which is these Albion slicker squares. They have a bunch of different profiles and like radius diameters on them. Just a little practice bead. I just kind of want to see what one of these chamfers looks like. These work a lot better than I thought they were going to, honestly. There's that chamfer. This is a 4 mil. I believe it's a radius or diameter, I'm not sure, and then this was the 6. I think we'll probably go with the 4. Seemed to work well. I'm a pretty big fan of using painter's tape to get a nice clean caulk line, especially on like tile applications where you're dealing with grout joints. Because you can kind of work the tape into the grout joint, make sure that no caulk bleeds into that. Nothing more satisfying than pulling the tape for a nice clean line. And this one actually was not as smooth as my first ones because I didn't realize it. Underneath this ledge, there was some grout that didn't get cleaned off. So it's like dragging the slicker across sandpaper. Gave it a little bit more roughness, but still think that looks pretty good. Tape makes all the difference. Just want to get a good fat bead so that we have something to tool. Try to pump it into the joint as much as possible. We're going to be putting a piece of base molding here anyway, so this is just sort of temporary. I probably should have taped to get a straight edge down here, but man, that was clean. That slicker leaves such a crisper finish on it than a finger does. Yep, just sort of follows the curvature of the tile. We'll try a straight edge on the next one. Yeah, definitely better with the straight line.
It's not that
Hard to notice it either way,
see
honestly.
it.
Our curb has kind of an overhang on both sides. It's really tough to get to with a normal caulk tube nozzle. Luckily, Albion has a product that solves this. It's their angle shot nozzle. Makes it really easy to get in these like weird, hard to reach places, and it works with any normal 10-ounce caulk tube.
I gotta say, this is helpful, like, because I can actually see up in where I'm at. The caulk gun is far out of the way. This is a lot of what construction is, though. The worst body positions in the world. Working on cars is also similar.
Well, that was uncomfortable, but I will say this thing made that a lot easier. Same with this. Not often you need a tool like this. This is a pretty niche thing. Not many situations that warrant it, but when you do get into a situation like that, this is really, really helpful. Behind a kitchen sink is another one too. If you don't want to take the faucet out, that's a really tight area to caulk up against like the countertop to backsplash transition. So another good use for this guy. And my flexible spatulas couldn't have gotten there either. So having this little smoothing square helped as well. So we're going up now. I'm gonna finish off our use of the clean and seal at the ceiling to wall transition. I say we leave the blue tape in the shower. It's kind of a cool modern accent. The tape is definitely more work up front, obviously, but it really takes the pressure off when it comes to like actually putting the bead out. You don't have to worry so much about getting the perfect bead because you know you're gonna tool it and you're not gonna make a mess afterwards. And that's huge for going over these grout joints because it would be really tough to hit one of these speed bumps every 8 inches all the way down this wall and extrude a perfect bead the entire way. Like that would take some practice, and I only have 2 joints to practice on. If I had an entire commercial building full of joints like this, I would not be taping off anything. You don't think about it much, but caulking is actually part of the carpenter's union trade. There are people that all they do is caulk, and those are people you want to watch some videos for because they are a different breed. Like literally running miles of caulk every single day. And when I tool this, I don't have to worry about dragging this big glob of sealant all the way up because the tape is shielding the wall from that. That turned out way better than I expected it to up here, and thanks to nothing but the painter's tape. Like, wow, that left such a clean line. I'm impressed. The only part that did not turn out well is right there, where my painter's tape pulled off my ceiling paint. So I'm gonna touch that up. Big thanks to Kills Primer on that. Now for the most important 4 joints, the floor to wall joints. Still gonna be using the silicone here because it matches the grout on the floor and this wall. And I've just vacuumed the whole floor so all of the dust and dirt is out of these cracks. Went through it with my little scraper and a rag as well to just make sure it was nice and clean so we get really good adhesion. I was skeptical about these green slicker squares because I liked my flexible spatula so much before, but after using this, I think this might be my new favorite slicker tool because you don't need to lubricate the bead really with it. There's no surface area for this thing to like catch and drag because it's just this sharp little edge. I was really impressed with how it did with this silicone. It's so tiny and maneuverable too. You can get it in all these little spaces that you couldn't get the big spatula. So definitely a good little thing. I'll link these below. Well, I never thought I would see the day, but we are nearing completion. Literally the only thing left to do here is put on our trim kits, our heads, touch up this paint on the ceiling, and we're ready to have a shower. I guess I gotta put the shower curtain and rod up too. We will do a glass door, double glass door eventually, but that is gonna be in the future. I looked into those and they are crazy expensive off the shelf, so I might be trying to custom make that. I'm not sure, we'll see. These shower rough-in valves are called Delta multi-choice units. The cool thing about these, and I think other manufacturers have similar versions of this, is one rough-in valve works with the whole line of fixtures. So you don't have to worry about picking out your trim kit and your shower head and all that when you're in the rough-in stage. You just put the valve in, and then when you're at the finished stage, ready to put the trim on, anything works. So I've already done a pressure test on this, and there should be water in this barrel. I gotta remove this little gray thing. It's a test plug. There might not be water in it, I don't know. Hopefully it's not under much pressure. Yep, there was water. Glad I had the sponge ready and a bucket below. So. This trim kit is called the Delta Sailor. The main reason we liked it was it has this separate little temperature knob so you can keep the temperature constant and all you're controlling with the big knob is on or off. That is part of the reason we have 2 showers in here, is because Elena and I take very different temperature showers, and it's gonna be really nice for us to each just have our own. We leave the temperature where we want it and we turn it on or off, so we're not constantly messing with the temp. So I just turned the valves on down at our home run manifold. I wanna flush the pipes here just a little bit before I put the shower head on. And at the same time, I'm gonna make sure that this temperature knob is in the right spot. The instructions aren't super clear about where to put that black rotational ring to allow you to get the hottest water here. Our water heater's set right, so I don't wanna be limiting hot water flow here. So this is just gonna be a test run. All right, valves downstairs are on. This is gonna be the first time this has ever had water come out of it. Got air. There we go. That's good flow right there. Just gonna keep it cracked. I'm aligning the handles while it's in about the 3/4 hot position. That's probably about where it's gonna be, and I think that looks the best when they're in line. It's just a tiny little set screw that goes up in here. Then a little button plug. These heads have a face seal gasket like a hose, but it still says in the instructions to put some tape on it, and I'm gonna guess that's so you can remove it easier in the future. Nothing to do with sealing. Cool. There's like a button here for different spray modes. It's kind of neat. Pause, I guess. I don't know what that is. Got a shower. I don't trust the little foam gasket that's on the back of this thing. Actually, with these uneven tiles, you can even see it a little bit right there. So I'm just gonna run a little bead of clear Lexel about 3/4 of the way around this, leave the bottom open so it can always drain. That'll make sure no water can get in the wall through the top of this. I was not about to get this far and leave an ugly bead in the most obvious spot, so yes, I did take the time to tape this off as well to make sure the bead was perfectly clean. Guys, that is a wrap on the dream shower build out. We could not be happier with how this turned out. Like everything, the tile choice, going up to the ceiling, the fixtures, the niches, the offset controls, really everything turned out exactly like we designed. The only thing I gotta do is put up the shower curtain temporarily, but like I said, the next big update on this will be a sliding double bypass glass door. This project was a ton of work. It was really one of the most tedious things that I've done on the build yet, measuring within a millimeter tolerance on some of these niche parts, and just so much repetitive work. I think there's over 300 tiles on each side wall. The large format on the back was new, you know, the mosaic on the floor for the whole bathroom, just a lot of cutting, fitting, measuring, but it all was totally worth it. We wouldn't change a thing. I wanted to talk briefly about costs on this project too, because tile is just so expensive. This was not something that we ever really considered hiring out because it's so hard to trust someone to do as good of a job as you know you can do. That's just me being a perfectionist. But I don't even want to know what this would have cost labor-wise. I'm gonna guess 10 to 15,000 just for labor for a shower of this size, a 4x6, all the way up to a 9-foot ceiling. If you're a tile guy or if you've paid for a shower recently, I'm just curious to know what it would stack up against the going rate today. I'm just not sure. Material-wise, just the tile by itself is expensive. We have thousands of dollars just in the tile for this. fixtures as well. Make sure you're signed up for our email list, masondixonacres.com. We have a new offer upcoming for owner builders in 2026. If you've got an addition, remodel, new build, dream home plan, we're making a product that's exactly for you. I'm not gonna say what it is yet, it's a surprise, but make sure you're on the email list and you will be the first to know about it. Hope this helped you if you're building out a custom dream shower. As always, thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.